Okay, let's start. Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are joining. Thanks for joining to the YouTube live series session, Tech Talks Asia. And today so this is a series of sessions which we used to regularly do. And as a bonus sessions in the month of May, we just started to add more information to our audience. And today's session is majorly focused on advanced multi-layer security with Azure Stack HCI. Basically, it means that it starts from your on-premises from chip to your on-premises, and how do you ensure to have a best of a security to your Azure Stack HCI setup from the Azure perspective as well. Before we jump on to the detailed session, would request you all to even just follow us and get back your more learnings from our channel called Microsoft Hybrid User Group. And if you like the content, yes, you have an option to share it to your customers and partners for your reference too. Okay, so the total agenda of what we are doing this kind of activities is basically to inspire you and ignite you and give you the best practices which can be helpful for you all to take it further for your next actions when you are speaking to your end customers and the partner requirements. Okay, so today we have our core team. So I call them as showrunners, right? So generally, we used to do more of demonstrations, and with the latest technologies coming into the picture, we are graced to request our Intel Alliance lead partner, Mr. Malcolm, also to come and share us certain things on a security perspective, because after the COVID, security has become a primary norm for every organization to consider across, right? So this is our team. So you can follow them on LinkedIn, and you can able to get in touch with us over an email as well. So what actually inspires us is the collaboration and the new technologies which Microsoft and Intel together brings to us. And this session and this series of sessions are being supported by Intel and Microsoft. Okay, so to start with, the most important aspects of Azure Stack HCI security is mostly found in these three pillars, right? The first one is basically cloud security from Azure, multi-layer security from firmware, hardware, and even at the protocol layers to built in with antivirus and anti-malware. And these are all compliance standards like FIPS and many audit needs, right? These are all things which actually collaboratively helps every customer to follow and integrate the security perspectives. These are all these forms are basically very powerful platforms to secure all your workloads, right? Because Azure Stack HCI is an on-premises solution integrated with Azure, right? So basically, these powerful platforms helps every customer's workload to be more secure. Okay, so to start with, secure core is something which is very nearby and very interesting solution which Microsoft has recently enabled, right? So secure core is a collection of capabilities that offers built-in with the hardware, firmware, drivers, and operating system security features, right? This protection provides by secured core systems begin before the operating system boots. Means if your server, if you feel a threat when the server is rebooting, when the server is restarting, at the boot level itself, it pauses, it continues to have a proper security check is done, right? So it is built in, and it has a three biggest pillars, right? Creating a hardware back root for the trust, and defending the firmware level attacks, and protecting the operating system from the execution of uni-verified code. Okay, so to make it simple, so this is a standard, right? So Windows Server generally integrates closely with hardware to provide increasingly level of security. So the recommended baselines, what you can see is the minimum of all the systems to be provided with the foundation system integrity using a TPM 2.0. Okay, and which can become a hardware root of secure trust, right? So TPM 2.0 and secure boots are required majorly for a Windows Server hardware certification, right? So the second important thing is when it comes to secure core, right? So secure core server, it recommends for the systems and industries required high level of assurance, okay, which can build on previous features, used advanced processor capabilities to provide protections against your firmware attacks. This is one of a very important thing. And the recent integration, what we can able to see from Admin Center, this is one of a small screenshot to you guys to have a reference, which is from the admin center, when we are actually looking at the perspective of a security, right, where you can able to see this left side bar, you can able to see that all the parameters, all the recommendations for secure go is enabled or not. This is a simple view where you can able to double check your infrastructure when you are using it in your on premises, right? So with this, I would like to invite our sponsor and Intel speaker from Singapore location who has joined us to give us the best practices from the hardware level, especially from the Intel's perspective. What is that it is improved and what is the value add which can be bringing to your infrastructure, especially from the hardware perspective. I would like to invite Mr. Malcolm, who leads Azure Alliance from the entire APJ, and he is basically from Intel. So Malcolm, over to you. You there?
Thanks, Amma. Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me share my screen, and then we can start. Oh,
We can see.
yeah, okay. So, okay, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're from. I'm based in Singapore, Malaysia, so I'm assuming that most of you guys would be in around noontime here, had your lunch. So very quick introduction, right? My day job, you can probably look at me as the Cloud Alliance lead for Microsoft. So Microsoft is my one and only trusted partner here. I only work with Microsoft and everything under the Azure banner, which would include the Azure Stack HCI. Now, um, let's go into a little bit what Amma was touching on just now, right? Which is, the security and the security posture for software, hardware, and firmware level, right? Um, Now, but if you look at the Intel security's posture, a lot of that starts at the CPU level, right? When we talk about hardware, we talk specifically about CPU. That's where Intel lives and breathes, and that's primarily what we sell to our partners as well. Now, the way we do this is we look at it from two different perspectives, right? And I like to simplify this so that day-to-day users understands what I'm talking about. And we primarily look at it from two different aspects. One is isolation, another is encryption. Now, what I mean by that is in Intel, we have two functionalities at a CPU instruction level, okay? Not at a hardware software. We directly build this into the CPU architecture. We have two, which we call one is software guard extensions, another one is called trust domain extension. Now, these helps you isolate your VM or your workload in what we would usually call a security or trusted domain, and it helps protect all of your operations on what you're doing or what you feel is important that needs to be protected. The other part of it is I would term it as encryption. So that is something that you can use um, to encrypt. One area that's very famous is crypto, right? So we have what we call pervasive encryption for crypto acceleration. So it helps actually improve your performance as well as retaining the security. We also have something else called memory encryption, where we encrypt the entire physical memory of a system. So that is a different layer of security that we're talking about here, right? So moving on from this slide, I want to leave you with a thought that you can always remember, which is when Intel provides security, we provide it at a CPU architecture level, right, which gives you unparalleled security. We want to leave you with as little opportunity as possible for dangers of uh, or compromise of being invaded, right, by anything that's undesired. So if we take a step back and look at the whole umbrella of partnership between Intel and Microsoft, why would you choose an Azure Stack HCI with Intel in mind? As you know, in the market today, we are not the only provider of CPU for the Azure Stack HCI architecture, right? We are probably one of three or one of two. Uh, Now, I would present to you our value, which is number one, I would say that it's performance and scalability, right? If you look at the third row, right? When we talk about scalability, what are we referring to here? We're referring to an
CRM
immense amount of
software
choice
doesn't
that you
have.
have, right, from the second to the third, and soon, hopefully, we would have a fourth generation Xeon scalable processor within the Azure Stack HCI architecture as well. Right now, we have a second and third gen, and within the second and third gen family, you have a whole load of a la carte menu of CPU choices, right? Depending on what the architecture design can offer you. And all of these brings top of class performance, right? You can, in terms of scaling your compute and capacity, you have a lot of flexibility here. Second is I would bring back to trust and security, which is something that we covered just now, right? You have all of these hardware-based control features at a CPU architecture level that lets you do so many different things in terms of data security. And last but not least is I will also tell you that in contrary to what many may believe, Intel actually is more than just a hardware manufacturer, right? In fact, we actually have a lot of configurable software and solutions, possibly in the space of, not possibly, definitely in the space of AI, right? I used to come from an AI background in Intel. So we have a lot of generative AI, natural language processing, and predominantly also a lot of visual based algorithms that you can directly, just plug and play and make further transfer learning from there to get your AI requirements fulfilled, right? So again, to focus on the third row, the blue row, right? First, performance and scalability from our Xeon family of processors. Performance. Actually, we also have something called the advanced matrix extensions. I'll go into it later to give you a bit of understanding. Then we have trust and security that comes with software guard extensions and trust domain extensions. These are, again, if you recall, a isolation-based security that we have, right? So moving to the next slide, we touch on the performance in scalability. So this is just a quick representation of what we can do when you simply look at a generation over the next, right? So when we build our family of processors, we build scalability in mind, and we build that in a way where you always have an opportunity to outdo your existing workloads. So you can see 100% better throughput, increase read latency, and increase write latency as well. And this is a comparison between our second and third gen. And in a while later, I will also show you what's the difference between our third and fourth gen, right? Um, I try to make this as graphically as interesting as possible, but believe it or not, I still find this a little bit quite technical. So just now, I quickly mentioned and I skipped away from advanced matrix extensions. What is this advanced matrix extension? Basically, for our latest generation of Xeon processors, we changed the way we design and manufacture our processor. Fourth gen Intel Xeon Scalable processor is currently launched and in the market today. It is our latest generation, and it is also very different from how we traditionally design our CPU architecture. So if you look on the right hand side, you would see that we used to design this in a monolithic fashion, which means 2D, 4x4, 6x6, whatever that is. But moving into fourth gen, we started stacking our die tiles, right? And it helped increase our scalability. Now, I don't want to go into the scientific, whatever it is. So just think of it that we are saving space and we're increasing the verticality instead of expanding this from a square foot area, right? And what that has allowed us to do is we can store bigger data, we can store more data, we can also create instructions, right? Such as AMX here that allows you to compute a lot more in a single operation, right? And that has actually given us 10x performance improvement on some of the workloads, especially in AI. You can look at the footnote, right? I think I'm not sure if you'll be given access to this slide, but if you have, you can go through the links I've provided, and then you can see what's there, right? So this 10x performance improvement is from our third gen, right? So that's a lot, as you can solve from a second to the third to the fourth. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is go into it a little bit, right? Because I think one of the things that we want to talk about today is security. So I've given you a little bit of taste on the different isolation versus encryption security. Now, today we want to deep dive a little bit on isolation security. So we said that there's this software guard extensions and there's this trust domain extension. What exactly are we talking about? So first of all, if you look at how um, the server is being constructed, from a memory processor, the OS, the hypervisor layer, and all that. So what we're trying to do here is I'm trying to give you a graphical representation of what's happening. And where a Intel software guard extension would come in is what we're trying to do is we're trying to partition what we call um, a security enclave, right? That sits directly on the processor, right? And what this do is it isolates everything away from your VM, right? Or from your OS. So if an attack comes in and it's going directly and attacking your OS layer, your data is basically safe because it's being isolated away from the OS and the VM layer. Okay. And if you take this one step uh, even further, um, with Intel's Trust Domain Extensions called TDX, right? This is not available in Azure Stack HCI right now. It's available on our fourth gen Xeon Scalable processor, right? We will have to look at the architecture if this is something available. But this is very interesting to talk about. Definitely, is we create a virtualized trust boundary, right? And what is happening is it is happening in a totally separate world altogether in its own VM environment. So it's one additional layer of security. If I were to go to the next page, you'll understand what I mean, right? The SGX, it creates a security, sort of a security nest within the VM that's separate from the OS. So if an attack comes into the OS, your data is safe. But what's happening with TDX that I say, we're taking this one mileage even higher is that it's two separate VMs altogether, right? Meaning your security nest with all of the important data that you view that is highly critical that cannot be compromised. Under the TDX software and hardware architecture, you can create a separate VM that has its own um, operating system image together with your security and data nest, and that is totally separate um, from the untrusted environment. So when some so in terms of implication, what's the implication? Your performance is faster because it is not just a data nest with within the entire VM, right? So it's two separate VM. It's running on its own. So that's what's a huge difference that we hope that it's going to bring not only a security but security at uncompromised performance when we talk about the latest generation of security features in Intel TDX. Now, what does this mean to you, right? As a Azure Stack HCI soon to be or already an existing user, is that of course definitely right now today, if you go into your BIOS, if you go in your hardware architecture level, aside from all the software features that my counterparts will talk about today, you're gonna have at the very foundational, at the very core layer, you are gonna be able to demonstrate this level of security to begin with, right? Not even thinking about orchestrating any software yet. So this gives you really unparalleled trust and security for whatever that you are wanting to do for your company or for your partners. So with that, we talked about the hardware. Now I want to pass it back to Amar and the team. Please go ahead to go through the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. I think it's very interesting and very informative, especially for the partners who has been trusted customers, I can say, or the trusted sellers who has been promoting Azure Stack HCI or the Intel architecture. And it's a eye opener for everyone to understand the depth of the technology, what actually running behind of their infrastructure, right? So thanks for that. And we just understood from the chip level, from the basically from the hardware level, what exactly it is, right? Now let's look at little bit depth on our on-premises solution, what we speak as Azure Stack HCI. What all this built-in on-premise securities which we can able to evaluate or use in it, right? So for example, to start with, right? So DNS over HTTPS, okay? It's a simple protocol which actually performs your remote domain, say your naming system via HTTPS protocol, which is encryption method, which is one of the encryption method, which is more useful, right? So this is very simple one, which is part of your server operating system, which is part of your HCI operating system, which you can able to utilize for your day-to-day activities, right? The second one is an SMB encryption, SMB compression, which allows all the administrator, user, and application to have a specific files to be transferred over the network, which actually removes the first manual deflate file with an application, right? So it can help you for copying it or then inflate on the specific computer or the specific destination computer. So the third one I would like to touch upon is basically the SMB encryption, which provides an SMB data end-to-end encryption and protects data from all the eavesdropping occurrences on the trusted networks, right? You can deploy SMB encryption with a minimal effort because this is again a simple one. This is very easy to use kind of. It has no requirements of internet protocol security or a WAN accelerators. Okay, SMB encryption can be configured on as per share basis on or on an entire file server. You can also enable it various scenarios where data travels on the untrusted networks, right? And the third important element is the browser which we use, right? So Microsoft Edge, which is embedded with the Defender Smart Screen, right? It helps you to provide the in advance warning system against the websites which might engage to phishing attacks or attempt to distribute a malware through a focused attack, right? So Microsoft Defender Smart Screen helps actually safeguarding all your security against phishing and malware sites and softwares, which can help you be more informed decisions about the downloads, right? Why are we speaking about this all securities, right? Because data is becoming more valuable for entire organizations, right? And the last one generally used to be one of a thing which actually helps most of our administrators when they are actually adopting, when they're going with the HCI, because hyperconverged infrastructure is basically a cluster model, right? The goal of a cluster aware update is basically to maintain availability by updating one server in a cluster at a time. Means if you have multiple servers in a cluster, you can able to directly do, right? Many operating system updates requires taking the server offline, right? So for example, to do this restart or update software such as network stacks or feature that makes you install updates every server in your updating automates and making sure your server in and out maintenance mode, right? So cluster aware update is basically a default updating method using an admin center, so which actually has been done earlier demos as well in the sessions, right? Admin center plays the biggest role for managing your entire infrastructure when you are on premises or HCI or in a hybrid integration, right? It actually can be even managed from the PowerShell. So to just give us a live demos walkthrough for this, I would like to invite my colleague, Mr. Ko, to come on a screen sharing and help us the live demonstration of this specific scenarios. Okay, over to you, Ko.
Yeah, thanks, Amma. Let me share my screen. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen. Go ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. All right, thanks, Amma and Malcolm, for the great sharing in terms of the overview and the architecture provided by Intel from the hardware level. Right. So from the Windows Server operating system perspective, right? So let's take a look on the multi-layer security that provided by Microsoft. Right. So these are the demo that I will go to start from the demonstrating on how the SMB compression can actually help us to actually reduce the packet size during the file transfer, as well as the SMB encryption, how the feature can actually help us to actually encrypt the traffic during the transmission. Right. And for data in transit, right? And I will also talk about the DNS over HTTPS on how the technology can help to actually encrypt the DNS query. Right? And After that, I will talk about how we can actually protect the data at rest with BitLocker, right, using the AES-256, right, encryption algorithm, right. And after that, I will talk a little bit about the Defender Smart Screen, how the protect can actually come from the browser layer, and also the cluster-aware updating that help us to actually update the clustered server, right. So let's start with the SMB compression, right? So this is a feature that allows the administrator, users, or application to request compression of files, right, as they transfer over the network, right? So the compressed file transmission will actually consume less network bandwidth, reduce network congestion, and of course, improve the time of the transfer and reduce the risk of exposing the file to the hacker within the network. Right? So let's take a look how I actually enable the feature and how I actually compare the transfer between the traffic that with the compression and without the compression. Right? So let's take a look on how I enable the feature using the Windows Admin Center. Right? And here, this is how I actually enable the feature in Windows Server 2022, right? And this feature is a new feature that are available starting from Windows Server 2022 and Windows 11, right? So here we take a look on the shared folder, and here there's an option saying that compressed file enabled, right? And I also have another folder which is without the compression enabled, right? As you can see here, the compressed data option is not turned on, right? So now I have two different folder. One is with the compression turned on and one without the compression turned on, right? So let's do a testing, right? So as you can see here, the one on the red color, right, is the robocopy command that will copy a 5 gig VHD file over the network, right, into the folder that without the compression, right? So this is a VHD file, which is 5 gig in size. So I'm going to start the copy, right? So from here, you can see that the copying progress is ongoing. And on the right hand side, I'll also bring out the task manager to show you that the copy process actually taking the entire network bandwidth within the network. Like for example, I'm actually having a 1 gigabit network, right, to serve all the user within the network, and my file copy already consume 1 gigabit, the entire bandwidth of the network. So the user will actually encounter bandwidth issue, low, how to say that, slow in network transmission, slow in application performance, because the copy process is already taken the entire bandwidth, right? So let's start on the second copy, right? This time I use the robocopy to actually copy the same file to the folder that with the compression, right? So from here you can see the copy process is very fast, and it only consumes less than 1 megabit, right? So it's almost more than 90% of saving. And in terms of time, you can see that it actually taken only about 10 seconds as compared to the 42 seconds on the folder that without the compression, right? So this is how powerful it is. The feature actually helps us to actually compress the packet that during the transmission of the file, and also help us to reduce the network bandwidth, right? So let's move forward, right? So as I mentioned earlier, this SMB compression feature is also available for Windows 11 client. Right, you can use the Windows Admin Center to actually turn on the feature on your Windows 11 machine. Right. So let's move forward. So let's talk about the SMB encryption. That can help us to actually protect our data against the middle attack during the transmission by encrypt the packet. Right. So let me walk you through on a very fast demo. Right. So I will use back the same machine, right, same Windows Admin Center screen, that to show you that I have created two different folders, right, additional two different folder, and one folder is with the SMB encryption turned on, and the other folder is without the encryption turned on, right? So this is just to quickly show you on the setting that we actually configure for the respective folder, right? So you can see here, one is with the encryption, one is without the encryption feature turned on, right? So I also drew in for you to take a look, right? So this is the option where we actually turn on the SMB encryption for the folder that I selected. And on the other folder, you can see here, I didn't turn on the SMB encryption features, right? So I will do a testing, right, on copying files and doing some normal process like create a folder, like create a file, right, update certain content into the file, right, and into the both location, both folder, which is the one with the encryption, and the other one is without the encryption, right? And on the right hand side, I also bring out the network packet monitoring tools that to show you how the packet is being sent through the network and how it's being captured from the network monitoring tools perspective, right? So first of all, I will start by doing all those activity like creating a folder, creating a file, update the files that in the folder that without the SMB encryption turned on, right? So you can see here, the network monitoring tools actually managed to capture all the activity that is performed by me, right, during the process, right? So even the path of the file, right, and the detail of the file that I actually entered into this respective file is all being captured by the network packet monitoring tools because all the packets is not being encrypted, right? So let's move forward, right? Let's take a look on how I actually do the same thing, same action, but this time is in the folder that with the encryption turned on, right? So you can see here, all the activity is being encrypted, right? So the network monitoring tools are able to actually manage to actually drill in and actually capture the information that in that particular packet because it's being encrypted, right? So this is how powerful it is. The tools the features can actually help us to actually encrypt the packet, right, during the transmission, right? Right. This will actually to provide the end-to-end encryption of the SMB data during the transmission, right? And it can be configured as a per share basis or for the entire file server as well, right? So let's move forward, right? So this is the log comparison, right, for the network monitoring tools. Right? The one on the left is the monitoring data that on the server, on the folder that without the SMB encryption enabled. Right? So you can see here, I can actually drill down into the log and know what's going on in the packet. Right? So for the screen on the right, which is the one actually with the SMB encryption turned on, where the monitoring package is being also that is in not a readable form because the network packets transmitted has been encrypted, right? So this is how powerful it is. The feature can actually help us to actually encrypt the data in transit, right? So let's move forward, right? So let's talk about the encrypted DNS query, right? So this helps to keep our DNS query traffic as private as possible, right? By preventing the DNS query data being manipulated, right? So let me play a video and show you how and what is the DNS over HTTPS, right? So by right, let me share the screen again, right? So
in this video, we will learn about the DNS over HTTPS technology, or DOH for short. And we're also going to learn about the future replacement of that technology, which is called Oblivious DOH. In order to explain DOH, we need to talk about what DNS does. DNS maps a domain name to an IP address so the packets can be routed through different networks in the internet. This is done by sending a UDP packet to the DNS resolver on port 53. However, the UDP packet is unencrypted and any en route devices such as ISPs can see this query and know the websites that the client is visiting, which is bad. DNS over HTTPS establishes a secure connection through TLS between the client and the resolver. This way, the DNS query is sent encrypted with a symmetric key agreed upon by both the server and the client. This stops anyone in the middle from sniffing the content of the DNS queries. Except the DOH server actually knows the DNS query because it has to decrypt the packet. And it also knows the client IP address, so technically it knows what website you're visiting. So bad or misbehaving DOH servers may decide to log and sell this data to the highest bidder.
Alright, so this slide is the basic concept of the DNS over HTTPS, right? So here I quickly wanted to show you how I actually configure and making sure the Windows Server 2022 that actually use the DNS over HTTPS features to actually encrypt the data from the DNS query perspective, right? So from here, let's quickly go to the setting, right? And we go into the network and the internet setting page, and we go into the IP address setting. From here, we can actually change the DNS setting to the server that actually support the DNS over HTTPS service. Right. So from here, we actually can select the protocol that actually supporting the encrypted only. Right. So all the packet that actually sent through this DNS query channel is actually being encrypted, and to prevent the manipulation from the middleman attack. Right? So here I quickly go to the website that actually validate my DNS query record, right, to show that I'm actually using the DNS with the encryption turned on. Right? So this is a checking tool that provided by Cloudflare. Right? You can actually go here and check your browser connectivity and making sure that whether your DNS over HTTPS settings is being turned on, and whether the TLS 1.3 protocol is being used in the setting. Right? So this is how it is, right, for us to actually turn on the features. Right? So after talking about the how we protect and encrypt the data in transit, right? From here, I also want to move into the area on how we actually protect the data that at rest, right? So Windows Server now support AES 256 cryptographic suite, right, for SMB encryption and signing as well as BitLocker, right? So BitLocker use the advanced encryption standard, we call it AES, as its encryption algorithm, right, with configurable key lengths from 128 right, to 256, right? So the default setting is 128, the AES 128, and I show you the method on how we can actually change the setting, right? So that we can actually use BitLocker to actually use the AES 256, right? The higher security cryptographic that we have at the moment, right? To actually encrypt the data at rest, right? So basically, we just go to the window policy, the group policy, right? In this scenario, I'm actually editing the policy on my server, right? So I will go to the local policy, and from here into the BitLocker section, right? There's an option that we can actually change the value of the encryption algorithm that actually used for the BitLocker, right? So from here, we can actually enable the custom setting, and from here, I can choose the AES 256-bit encryption method for my BitLocker, right? So once the setting is done, right, so I will actually refresh my group policy by issuing a command to tell the system that the setting has been changed. Kindly refresh your policy, right? So once the refresh of the policies is completed, I will basically go into the BitLocker management screen to actually turn on the BitLocker for my drive, right? For my drive that is located in my server, right? So from here, I go to the control panel and I go to the BitLocker drive encryption screen. From here, you can see that I can actually turn on the encryption for my drive C, right? And In order for me to actually turn on the encryption for my drive C, first of all, I have to save a copy of my recovery key, right? And the saving of the recovery key is actually having some restriction, right? First, you cannot save the recovery key in your root folder, your system drive, which is the drive C, right? And if you are trying to save the key into a root folder, right, like for example, the root folder of the other drive, you will prevent that as well, right? So you need to save the recovery key in the folder that are of the system drive, right? So after that, you just accept all the default setting, whether you want to encrypt the disk space, the use space only, or you actually encrypt the entire drive, right? So for me, I will actually encrypt the entire drive, right? So from here, we will start to click on enabling encryption, right? And let that encryption to start, right? So let's check out the steps to see to show you the process of the encryption, right? So once it's running, so let's move forward. Alright, so my encryption is done. Alright, so let's quickly go to the PowerShell and check whether the setting has been affected, and the BitLocker now is currently using the latest AES-256 encryption algorithm. Right, so I will actually issue a command, and from here you can see that. Alright, so my BitLocker now is already enabled in my drive C, and currently is using the latest AES-256 encryption method, right? So this is how we actually configure the Windows Server, right, to actually use the latest AES-256 encryption method to actually encrypt our drive, right, for data at rest, right? So let's move forward, right? So let's talk about the security features called Microsoft Defender Smart Screen that built in Microsoft Edge browser, right, which provide us an earlier warning system from the browser layer, right? So this basically will help users, help the IT pro to actually identify those reported phishing and malware website, and also help user make informed decision about a certain download, right? So let me do a quick comparison, right, between the Edge browser and the Google Chrome, right? So I will basically go to one of the virus sampling file provider called iCar, right? So I will do the same thing on the both browser, as you can see from the comparison here, right? So I will drill down and I will actually start to click on the virus sample file, right? So this first, I will click on the normal virus sample file. As you can see here on the left, the file is already brought by the Edge browser of this Defender Smart Screen, right? And on the right, which is using the Google Chrome, the browser doesn't actually block the malware file or the virus inside the file. So the file is actually downloaded and being executed. And however, because we actually have the virus threat protection enabled in our system, which is the Windows Defender, so the virus is actually quarantined and removed by the Windows Defender, right? So this is how it is, how powerful it is. The Microsoft Defender Smart Screen actually provide a browser layer protection for the user, right? Even it's actually for the very first layer that where the user use the browser to actually go access a certain website or trying to download certain files from the website. And this is the tools that can help us to actually protect from the browser layer, all right? So after talk about all the encryption, right, and the protection from the browser layer, we will also mention about how we can actually update our server, right, especially on the cluster, on the cluster layer, right? So this is a feature that we'd like to talk about, right? It's called cluster aware updating, right? So it's an automated features that enable administrator to update servers in a failover cluster, with little or no loss in availability, especially the workload during the update process, right? So this is a demo that I would like to quickly walk you through, right? So here I have a cluster with a 4 nodes configuration, But as you can see here, I have two volume. I have one virtual machine that is currently running, right? So before I go into the cluster aware update screen, right? So just take a look on the virtual machine, the workload that I'm currently running, right? And also the volume that I have in my cluster, in my cluster environment, right? And here I also bring out the cluster, the failover cluster manager to show you the ownership of the virtual machine, right? So that later on you will see that when the cluster aware update is running, right, the workload will actually line migrate to another node, right? And this is the process that the update tools, the update capability actually drain the workload from the server that is holding the workload and actually line migrate it to another server, right? And continue the update process one by one, right? And until all the nodes are completed, right? So from here, you can see that the cluster aware updating screen actually allow me to go through and review all the update that is available. And once I click on next, it will start to actually process the update, right? So this is the step that basically what does the cluster aware updating that, right? So basically the process will actually put each node, right, of the cluster into maintenance mode, right? Right. So you can see on the screen there, right? My node 1 is currently still how to say that, being actually moved into the maintenance mode, right? So once the server goes into maintenance mode, right, the process will actually auto line migrate the workload from it to another node, right, which is a node that is still running, right? And it will update and auto restart that particular node. Like for example, my node 1, right, as you can see here, now is currently restarting and resuming back to the cluster, right? And once the process is completed, it will start on the other node, right? And it will also auto wait for the cluster resources being recovered before processed to the next unit, right? And it will also process the next unit and repeat the above process until all the nodes are completed, right? So from here, you can see that now the virtual machine has been moved to the cluster, to the node 2, right? Same as the ownership of the volume, right? So, and as you can see, during the update of the server, the workload are still running, and it will take some time, right, for the process to complete, right? And once it's ready, up and running, right, and this is how it look like, and we're at the end of the process on how we actually perform the cluster aware updating in our cluster, right, with the auto line migration, right, and auto update and restart being performed in our cluster node, right? So this is how the cluster aware updating that can help administrator to actually update the server, the system in the failover cluster, right, with less or without downtime on the workload, right? So that's all for me. And over to you, Ahmad.
Thank you, Ko. I think it's very interesting. Right? So most of our customers and the partners have this environment, but majority they just need to use with our sharing.
Yeah.
That's very much helpful. Thanks for that. In the interest of time, Ko, I would just directly jump into the hybrid solution, right? So as of now, everyone has seen what all the built-in capabilities with Server 22, and especially with Azure Stack HCI, what you can able to start when you want to ensure that your data is secure and ensure that you have right protections for your user access, and how do you manage your because see, one of the important thing is the updates, right? So when you are managing the high-end kind of infrastructure like a hyperconverged or a cluster things, cluster aware update gives a lot of difference. That's the major thing which we need to pick up from today's, right? And going further, especially would like to just look into from the hybrid perspective, from Azure perspective, right? How do we actually get a lot of security aspect view features to our on-premises HCI or the server setup, right? Let's look into that a little bit. So to start with, I just wanted to give a sense of what exactly these all things are, right? So hot patching from Azure portal. What is this? It's a capability which you can able to patch and install all the updates from all the updates to their Windows Server 22 data center Azure Edition core virtual machines on without requiring any reboot. Means the hot patching helps all the customers not to have a downtime or a restart or a maintenance if you are using hot patching from Azure portal. The second one is Azure Arc, right? Azure Arc is basically like a bridge that actually extends your Azure platform to help you for building applications and services with all the flexibilities to run across the data centers at the edge or to the multi-cloud environments, right? The third thing, we have seen a snippet of Windows Defender Smart Screen, right? So we have one more thing from the Azure perspective, which is called as a Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is basically a cloud native application which is set to have a security measures and practices to design the protection cloud-based applications from various threats by various cyber threats and vulnerabilities, right? And few more, which is like Azure policy. It's a simple thing. It's like a policy what we use in our on-premises when we want to scale it up, enforcing to entire organizational standards to ensure that you have a right compliances at the scale. It helps you to make sure your policies are properly maintained from the cloud perspective. And the biggest important thing actually comes in is the Azure monitoring, right? A lot of administrators face the problem on the loads, on the balancing, and the triggers or errors or issues, right? So basically, Azure Monitor is a service which actually collects, analyzes, and acts as a telemetry from your cloud to on-premises, which helps for all the IT operations, DevOps, and other performance related for the applications and the services. Okay, and the last one is an update management, which actually helps you to automate all your operating systems running on your Windows server or Windows operating system. That update management feature is basically free, and only cost is the log storage from the Azure Log Analytics. Okay. So for just looking at it, how easy it is, because when we are speaking, it makes very simple, but let's see how it actually can be integrated for your setup. And for that, I would like to invite back again Ko to just give us a walkthrough and demos on hybrid capabilities of security from the Azure to on-premises HCI. Over to you, Ko.
Thanks, Sama. Can you see your screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, Ko.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sama. I'm back again with the hybrid security and management capability provided by Azure Arc. All right. So let's move forward. Azure Arc is the central control plane to security via the Windows Defender for Cloud, which will actually continuously monitor the security posture of the entire system. Right. So it visualize, analyze, and respond to monitoring data and events via the Azure Monitor, right? And in addition to that, Azure Arc audit the resources using the Azure policy, right? Azure Arc also gives us a powerful way to track changes, inventory, right? The system inventory, software inventory, right? And even the software updates and patches, right? And not limited to that, with the capability provided by Azure Resource Bridge, we can actually self-service the VM provisioning on the Azure Arc, right? And of course, using the Azure Auto-Managed profile to actually simplify the Azure Arc deployment, right? So let's move forward and take a look on the demo that I actually created, right? So in this demo, I'm going to show you how powerful Azure Arc is to help us manage the Azure Stack HCI, right? So here you have, I have a Azure Stack HCI cluster, right? And I'm going to zoom in, right, into node 1 of this cluster and show you what I can do with this, right? So let's take a look on the Azure Security Center, right? Now has been rebranded as Microsoft Defender for Cloud, right? It shows the overall security posture of my monitored environment with a secure score and provide the recommendation to actually improve it, right? And secondly, we take a look on policy menu, right? It shows the compliance stage of my monitored environment, right? I can click on those any of the non-compliant resources, right, to understand more about the compliant detail and recommendation on how can I actually to improve it to be compliant, right? And moving forward, we take a look on the log analytic menu, right? Here, we can actually enable log analytic features to visualize, right? We can analyze and respond to the monitoring data and events, right? From here, we can actually perform scripting to actually change the query, right? To actually fix the requirement by filtering the respective logging data, right? Speaking of the performance data, what can I also do is I can use the Azure Monitor to have an overview on resources utilization on my server. For example, I can actually monitor the CPU utilization, the memory utilization, and so on. Right? And at the same time, I also get a dependency map to actually have an overall understanding of the incoming and outgoing traffic to and from my monitored server, right? And from here, I can actually drill down into a respective endpoint that for this particular port, where does the server actually connected, right? And in addition to that, I also get change tracking capability on software, files, services, as well as registry, right? And I also get the software inventory as well, right? And so I can see here all the application which are installed and also the Windows services status from single pane of glass, right? And last but not least, I also wanted to show you the update management capability for enabled server, right? So from here, I can actually manage, actually drill down on how can I actually deploy the respective Windows update, right? And in addition to that, Azure Arc also allowing us to actually install the agent into the Linux operating system like Ubuntu, like CentOS, like SUSE, and so on, right? With a capability for us to actually manage the system from the multiple different platforms, right? And let's move forward, right? I also wanted to talk about features on how we can actually deploy the hot patch, right, from the Azure portal for my virtual machine that is running on Windows Server Data Azure Edition, right? Right, so this is something really new, right? I actually managed to record it, I think last month, right? So from here, you can see that I have a Windows Server 2022 Data Center Azure Edition, right? And I'm going to apply the hot patch into my system without rebooting my server, right? So in order to do that, in order to show you that, right, I will actually remote access into the Windows Server, the Windows Server Azure Edition, and I'm actually running the performance counter into my system, right, and to making sure that the counter is up and running during the process of my hot patch deployment, right. So from here, you can see that I have a hot patch. Yes.
I think it's a time check, Ko. Another 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Right. So from here, I can actually select never reboot, right? With the default setting for my maintenance window, right? And I can click next and to let the update to deploy, right? Right. So you can see here the deploy is currently in progress, right? So let me fast forward a little bit, right? So the deployment is actually submitted, right? And it's currently in progress, right? So from here, you can see that we can go into the history and see that the deployment is in progress. All right. So let's move forward. All right. After a while, all right, the update is completed. All right. So from here, we can actually click and have better understanding of the update. All right. And we can also go into the system performance counter screen to show that the server are still up and running, or the performance counter are still running during the process of my installation, right? And then also here, you can see that from this PowerShell screen, the new update, including the hotfix has been deployed, right? So this is how powerful it is. We can actually use the feature to actually patch the server without rebooting the machine, right? So I think that's all for me. And over to you, Ahmad.
Thank you, Ko. It was I feel these things are very simple. Only thing is we need to just start what's happening to analyze, right? So thanks for that. So let's just resume. Perfect, right? So as of now, we just seen almost multiple demos on the simple walkthrough on premises and from the chip level, from the Intel perspective as well. And I would like to thank both demonstrators or the presenters, I can say, which is like Ko and Malcolm for helping us, right? So these are all very simple tools, guys. It's basically thing is we need to just start exploring it. How do we utilize it for our day-to-day organizations? Okay. As a closure of the session, I would like to just remind today is the one which we have done about security, especially for the HCI or the on-premises setup. Okay, and we have one upcoming important session which is in the next Monday, which is on 29th. Basically, how do we follow a best practices for deploying an Azure Stack HCI. This is something which is a flow which we have been doing month on month. Okay, so we will have a special speakers that day because both are from the SI community and who do a lot of deployments for day-to-day customer needs, right? We can be getting our live experiences, what they have been following, what they have been learning, and every stuff. Okay. With this, and anyone have any questions, anything, please reach out to us over this email ID. It's just called a help@myearn.com. Okay. And a small urge is please subscribe to this channel and help us to share whatever you feel it is valuable for your end customers or to the technical teams, whatever you have been following. Okay. With this, I would like to thank each and everyone for the contribution for today. Yeah. So see you in the next week session, which is on Monday. One more coming up, which is deployment on Azure Stack HCI. Okay. Yes. So one more small thing as a takeaway I wanted to give you all is we even have managed a WhatsApp group, basically where you can able to understand the latest threats, latest situations on a security which is happening. We urge you all to just scan this QR code. I can place it for a few seconds so that you can join to our groups. And if not, you can just send us an email so that we can invite you directly from your mobile numbers to join this group, which actually enlightens most of our customers to understand the threats which is coming up to that, because we are in a world of work from anywhere, work from home, work from any situation, from any bandwidth, right? So as a responsible IT citizens, we need to ensure that we have a right set of tools and capabilities into it, right? So thanks again. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. So we can